Hello and welcome to the Huntsman World Senior Games Active Life. My name is Kyle Case, and I'll be your host on this amazing journey as we attempt to help you get the most out of your life. Today's guest, Sue Reynolds, knows firsthand that transformation is possible at any age. At 335 pounds, she struggled with everyday tasks like walking around the block or even tying her shoes. After years of unsuccessful diets, she tried again with a secret goal to complete a triathlon. This time, with a purpose, she lost more than 200 pounds and discovered a love for sport. Just 3 years after completing her first triathlon at the back of the pack, Sue finished sixth in the world and was the top American at the World Triathlon Championships. Curious about elite performance, Sue quit her job and trained with Olympic level coaches as if she were on her own Olympic pathway. In her 70s, while embracing an Olympian's habits and mindset, she won world championships in 2022 and 2023, but later developed severe overtraining syndrome, forcing her to rethink both her training as well as her priorities. Beyond sport, Sue was National High School Counselor of the Year and founded Inspire Success, a nonprofit that helps community leadership teams engage in the process of high performance. She is the author of The Athlete Inside and Across the Line, and 100% of author proceeds supporting the USA Triathlon Foundation, a very generous donation that she makes. Sue, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. What a nice introduction. That was sweet.
It's all true. I always share it because it's true, but thank you for joining us today, sharing your story once again. Now, you've been on the show before. For those that are interested and want to go back, and I think you will want to go back once we finish today's show. It's episode number 301. Sue has an incredible story, and today we're going to get into a bunch of different things. But just to kind of catch us up, Sue, tell us a little bit about that story once again. You started out in a place where you weren't as healthy as you wanted to be, struggled with some just basic tasks, overweight, looking for a change in your life, tried a bunch of different stuff, and you ended up in a very, very different place. Kinda bring us up to speed on how that all happened.
Yeah, I had been, morbidly obese, like, literally all of my life, and I'm really not sure what happened. I just one day, I just woke up and said, "Enough," and I think I wasn't so much, like, concerned about my appearance, I was more concerned about all the things I couldn't do because I was so big. Like, I couldn't even get into a public restroom, bathroom stall and close the door behind me. I mean, it was just there were just a ton of things I couldn't do. And I just started following a healthy lifestyle. I didn't, have any special diet or nutrition program. I just ate whole foods, but I, looked at limiting what I ate and then added exercise and to help speed up the weight loss. And I hated exercising. I just hated it. So to make it more enjoyable, I pretended that I was training for a triathlon, never intending to do one, but it just kinda gave purpose to the exercise, and it was just kind of fun to have that little daydream. And then I realized I could do all the distances and thought, "Well, why not try one?" And went to my first one having I didn't know any triathletes, I'd never been to a triathlon. Why I showed up at that first one, I do not know. But I finished it, and I felt like I had won the Olympics. I came in dead last, but when as I crossed the finish line, I held up a number 1 finger because I thought, "I'm number 1," even though I was dead last. But
You had earned it.
yeah,
You
so
had definitely earned it. I'm curious if there was a kind of a side reason or motivation why you chose triathlon. Why wasn't it, the discus or, you know, I don't know, horse,
yeah.
something like that?
So, I don't know. I remember there was someone told me a story about like 20 years earlier, someone told me a story about one of their relatives who went to Hawaii to do this really cool event where they swam and they biked and they ran and I just thought that that sounded cool and it was something that sounded really hard. So it just kind of was a nice capstone of something like to work toward. And again, I never thought that I would actually do one, but yeah, I mean, I was more shocked than anybody that I actually did it. So,
Well, I am a little bit curious about that. I know you said that in the midst of just trying to live a healthier life, you kinda had this I imaginary thing that you were working towards. You were gonna do a triathlon. You never really intended to do it, but at some point, you must have said, "This might be my thing." What changed in your heart when you realized that? Like, you're going along, it's just an imaginary thing, a daydream, as you said, and then all of a sudden it becomes real. Like, what was that emotionally like for you?
yeah, I think there were 2 points. The first point that comes to mind was when I walked my first 5K, and there were you know how they have the aid stations with the little glasses of water?
Right, yeah.
So and I walked by this aid station and I thought, "Well, that's for the runners, that's not for me because 'cause I'm just walking and I don't really deserve a glass of water." And this volunteer came running out from behind the table and she handed me a glass of water and she said, "Here, this is for you." And I just it made me feel like an athlete, and I just love that feeling. And then I think the second time was the second part was when I crossed that first finish line in dead last place, but I, like, immediately went home and signed up for another because I just there's something so encouraging and happy about the endurance sport community that I just fell in love with. I mean, people were so encouraging to me, and now I get to be encouraging to others through the books and other ways, and I just love the community.
You know, I say this all the time, and just like your intro, I only say it because it's true, but the idea of community and, the social aspect, the support aspect is one of the greatest things about sport as a whole, and you certainly experience that in the endurance sport community. We see that across the board regardless of sports, whether it's teammates, competitors, especially in senior sports and master sports. There just seems to be this real genuine feeling of camaraderie and working together and helping each other out. Of course, we all want to do our best. And if it comes right down to it, we want to be the one that crosses that finish line in front. Of course, all that is still true. But there is something really special about the masters and senior sporting community. And as you said, you see it in droves in the endurance community as well. I also think that there is something about shared suffering that just kind of bonds people and brings people together. Do you agree?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. When you're after the race, when everybody's standing around and everybody's saying, "Oh my gosh, that hill on the bike, how did you survive it?" Yeah, there's very much something bonding about that.
Yeah, it definitely makes it a fun experience overall. So you've written a couple of books. The first one we talked about in, as I said, episode 301. If you want to go back and check that episode out, it's called "The Athlete Inside." You've written a new book since then. Tell us a little bit about the book. It's called "Across the Line." Excuse me, "Across the Line," and it really focuses on, elite athletes and what that looks like. And tell us a little bit about this book.
Yeah, so the first book, The Athlete Inside, is about losing the 200 pounds and doing my first triathlon, and I really wrote it to encourage other people to think about, what was possible for them in not only in sports, but in their careers or whatever, and just going after it and that anything is possible. And I thought that was going to be it, but lots of people kept asking for a sequel. And, the first book did really, really well. It was the number 1 triathlon book off and on for a couple of years and in Amazon. So I really didn't have any more story to tell. I had been back to Worlds and I had finished, several times in the top 10 and, but it there it was just same old, training and training. But then I got really curious about what would happen if I really committed like an Olympian would commit. And, I was approaching retirement. I decided, "What the heck? I'm just gonna quit my job, and I'm going to pretend that I'm an Olympian. I'm gonna hire Olympic coaches and see if I can implement the daily habits of like an Olympian would, and also the mental strength." And I was really curious about the mental strength part. I wondered if there was mental strength that was so far beyond me that I didn't even know it existed. So I really was curious about that. So, yeah, so I hired, Olympic level coaches, and the first part of the second book is the first half of it is about stepping up from training as an elite amateur would train to training like a pro would train, and that was a huge learning curve. There were times when I thought I was going to die, but I didn't. Yeah, and then the second half of the book, as you were mentioning it, there was kind of a downward trend that where I discovered that the same attributes like grit and resilience and hard work, that those same attributes can carry you upward, but you can also overdo them to the point of injury, and then you come downward. So and then I had to reexamine, as you said, my priorities and values and really figure out what I thought was important in life.
And I want to dig into that a little bit more, but before we do that, tell us your experience. Do you feel like there is a pretty significant difference between an elite age group athlete training to be their best versus a professional or an Olympic level athlete?
Very much so, and I'm not the only one to have done this. There are others who have decided to train at that kind of level like a pro would. I think the main difference is that for professionals, it is your career, and it's a 24-hour-a-day career. So as an amateur, well, I still am an amateur, but as at that level, as an age grouper training like an age grouper, I worked triathlon around my family, and I worked triathlon around my job, and I wasn't willing to risk my health, and but at the professional level, it's like really what matters is your training, and it's a full-time job. You're either doing, like I did 2 or 3 workouts a day, but then the rest of the time is preparing for those workouts. So, like between workout 1 and workout 2, I had to make sure I had a nap. I had to make sure that I had a proper nutrition. I had to make sure mentally that I was ready for the to hit that second workout hard. So it's just really it's a full-time job. And then the other part is that when you're preparing to be the best in the world, you're willing, at least from my experience in observing the coaches that I worked with and they're actual Olympians who I viewed as my teammates. Um, they're you have to be willing to take risks because 'cause you're pushing that line, and it's the line's invisible. It's so easy to go over that line into overtraining. And when I was training like an age group athlete, we never I mean, we got close to that line, but we never really got right to it. When I before I started this half of my journey, I actually went to my sports doctor and I said, "I'm 70 years old, what's the worst case scenario here?" Because I thought maybe I wanted to make sure that these coaches couldn't kill me, you know? And
It's a fair question, right? It's a fair
I
question.
I really was, like, concerned about that because of my age. And, but my sports doc is wonderful, and he said, he checked. I mean, we did all kinds of tests, so he knew what my heart was like, he knew what, everything was like, all my data, and he said the worst that could happen is that you would get an injury that would take you 6 months to to come back from. You might have to change sports depending on what the injury is, but you won't die. And at that point, I said, "Okay, I'm in." So, yeah, so I just went down that road, and it was a very different road than the training I had been doing.
Well, it sounds like an incredible level of commitment, and to hear you talk about it, it gives me a greater appreciation for those who are, really striving and doing this professionally or at a world class level. So, congratulations on the grit, the determination, the willingness to put yourself through it. I think that's just amazing. I do want to get into this overtraining syndrome concept. I'll admit that's a new phrase to me. I think I get what it is, but I'd never heard that phrase before. You say that it's kind of a little bit like an invisible injury. So
Mhm.
talk about kind of what it is and how it really affected you in the goals and the training and the way that you were living your life.
Yeah. So what it is, it happens when the stress that one puts on their body is not met by the recovery. And, recovery, of course, people think of recovery as sleeping and getting and taking naps and getting rest that way. But, recovery also comes from nutrition and having proper nutrition to fuel your body. So it's nutrition, it's sleep, it's rest, and then stress, when I came into this, I thought, well, the stress is from training, but stress can also be mental stress. If you have an argument with your best friend and, you're stressed up over that, well, that adds stress to your system. It can come from travel. It can, there's a lot of different, sources of stress. And when you have high stress and then, not enough recovery, when there's that mismatch, then your body can start to react in ways that you don't want it to. So, and I'll talk about the symptoms in a minute. But I also want to clarify that it's okay to be tired in training. So there's just regular being tired. There's overreaching, which is a good thing in training, where at the end of your training block or the end of the week, you're like exhausted. You've had it. But you'll come back from that overreaching with rest. So, like, in my training, when I was training with my age group coaches, we always the 4th week, we always took a recovery week. So, we would stress out my body, we would take the recovery week, and then during that recovery week, my body would rebuild and get stronger. So, that's what you want. You want to have that overreaching, healthy overreaching, that's ideal in training. But in overtraining, you go too far and your body can't react to rest. It can't recover from rest. So you rest, but your body doesn't really get that you're resting, and so everything's just kind of messed up, and your organs really just kind of go haywire. Your adrenal gland doesn't work properly, your hormones are all messed up, your sleep cycle's all messed up. It's just you can't put out performance like you did. Yeah, so it's really not a place you want to be, and it can take months or even years, or for some people, they have it a lifetime. So
Yeah.
I'm I'm hoping mine's not a lifetime. I don't think it is, but yeah, so it's something you want to avoid, and it's very easy to get into even if you know about it.
Yeah.
It's hard to because it's like that invisible line that you're not really sure where that line is until you've pushed over it.
I would imagine that is what makes it so difficult to internally as well as those around you to diagnose. You talked about some of the symptoms, even as you said, even up to and including organ failure. So it's definitely something that you want to be aware of. I'm curious, first to start when did you first start to feel like something's really not right here? Like, was there a warning sign? Was it advice from an outside person? What kind of led you to reach that understanding that something's not really firing the way it should?
Yeah. So, looking back, in hindsight, now that I know where I ended up.
Which is always the best way
Yeah.
to understand what's going on, right? It's
I
always in the rearview mirror.
Yeah. I think the first symptom was that I started gaining weight and had a really hard time taking it off. And I just thought that I wasn't being disciplined enough about my nutrition.
Yeah.
So I tried to, even cut my calories a little bit more, which was the wrong thing to do for that point at that point. But, what we found out later was that my resting metabolic rate dropped by 36%. And yeah, so the calories that I could normally sustain were now causing me to gain weight because of my resting metabolic rate. So that was the first sign, but I had no clue. The second sign was what people pick on up on, normally, and that is, workouts that should have felt easy felt incredibly hard. I can remember one bike workout. It was an easy 2-hour ride where all I had to do was make the pedals go around. And I did it on the trainer because it was raining outside and I could not make those pedals go around. And I'm using watts and I'm looking at my computer on my bike, and the watts that I would normally do for an easy ride felt like I was over threshold. I mean, I couldn't do it. But again, this is one of the things that I think makes, overtraining syndrome so easy to slip into. I just assumed my power meter was broken. So I thought, "Oh, I must be doing hard watts because it feels hard." So I had no idea. I thought, and I wrote to my coach, "This is really weird. I think my power meter's broken." So he didn't have good information either because I was finding all these other explanations other than overtraining syndrome.
Yeah, which I get. I understand. I can just I've never experienced this myself, so I'm just imagining, but
Yeah.
I feel like I'm the kind of person who just wants to say, just, buck up, just buck
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
You
yeah.
had a bad workout, that's fine. Come back tomorrow, it'll be better. Grit your teeth. You can do it. This might come from some of my wrestling background, but I feel like that would be something that I could very easily see myself doing and then just continuing and pushing when in all reality there may be a different issue there than just not bucking up, right?
Yeah, and that's in the book, I examine overtraining syndrome from a systems approach, and I think part of that is like you say, we have as athletes, we have all those sayings, "Suck it up, buttercup," and "Shut up, legs," and, just push through and keep going," and that's and we put people who do those things up, like, on this pedestal, and we all feel like we should be like that. One of the messages I try to bring out in the book is that I think grit is wonderful, and it certainly is what gets you, to go up, but it has to be coupled with wisdom, and at the time, I didn't have wisdom. I didn't have common sense. I mean, just because I was pretty young in athlete years to be working with an Olympic, level coach,
Yeah.
and I was, with the coach that where I was overtrained, I was his first age grouper and I was his first older athlete, so we were both kind of, like, experimenting with all of this, but I didn't have enough trust in my own ability to know when was too much, to say to my coach, "Wait a minute, we need to stop." And he kept, he's an Olympic level coach. He was like, "Let's get up to that line. Sue can do a little
Right,
bit
yeah,
more."
trying to get the most that he can out of
Yeah,
his athlete, which
yeah.
is why you hired that individual to help.
That's exactly right, and
Yeah,
sometimes I think people, like and even me, after I was pulled from training, I wanted to, like, blame everybody, but then I had to think, "Wait a minute, you hired him and you asked him to train you like an Olympian." And this is how Olympians, train, and sometimes I mean, it's not there's a good percentage of Olympians that go to the Olympics injured because they've been trying to push that line,
and
and I really I'm very grateful that my coach trained me the way he did because I got to explore and learn about all these things that I wouldn't have gotten to explore if he hadn't, so
well, and Sue, let's just be honest. You did something from where you started to where you are now, and that whole journey in between. You did something that is almost unbelievable. You started out in one place, as you said, morbidly obese, 335 pounds, just really in a different situation. And then you brought yourself to the point where you're literally winning world championships, not figurative, not like moral victories, which are there's massive value in all of those experiences as well. But you're literally winning world championships. And then all of a sudden, you kind of run into another wall along the way after you've overcome so many things. Triathlon at this point has to be just ingrained in your DNA, who you are. And now you hit this wall, this new challenge. Tell us a little bit about what that feels like, emotionally to be on the top of the world and especially starting from the place where you started to get to that point and now all of a sudden things are different. Like, how does that feel?
yeah, that was a little bizarre. Um, the so my coach called and said, "I'm pulling you from training, you're overtrained." And the next day in Training Peaks where he would put my, workouts every day when you do the workout, the little box turns green, and I love turning those boxes green throughout the week, and, like, the next day, there was nothing in the box, so and I'm, like, looking at Training Peaks, and I'm thinking, "Hmm." His instructions to me were to just do what I felt like doing, and, um, and I remember, like, the first day, I thought, "Well, I'll just go out for a quick run or a quick walk." And I thought I'd walk for an hour or something, and I got to 10 minutes, and I was just done. I mean, just that was it. But I was still in that mindset of pushing. So I thought, "Well, my body feels tired. It's only been 10 minutes, though. Maybe I could get to 12 minutes." And then I thought, "No, no, no. That's the mindset that got you into trouble to begin with. Your body says stop. It's been 10 minutes. You have to stop." But there was a huge sense of loss. I went through probably all the stages of grief.
I'm certain you did, Sue, I'm sure you did.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, from denial, maybe I'm not really overtrained to I was angry at my coach for a while. I was angry at myself for a while because I thought, "Why did I let this happen?" "Why didn't I say no?" And, "Why didn't I listen to my body?" And so it was a long and plus there's and this is one of the reasons why I wrote the book. There's virtually no case studies written about overtraining syndrome, and although it's very common, but I think, I knew nothing. I mean, I felt like a pioneer, like, "Now what do I do?" So, yeah, it was mentally hard.
I can only imagine emotionally, mentally, spiritually, the whole thing. But you went through it. You're in the process of going through it. You say that you did find your way back to joy. How did you do that?
So, I had to when I was examining what why I allowed this to happen, why I didn't say no, why I wanted to push so hard, and it really was a sacrifice, like, I no longer had a social life, my family had to work around, my training. So and then I thought, "Is this really what I want?" And I really studied and thought about when does passion cross the line between healthy passion and toxic passion? And for me, that the definition was when passion starts to conflict with your values, then it becomes toxic passion. And I had to look at my values around family, my values around health, and I thought, "Man, I'm not living by my values anymore." And that was something I wanted to do differently. So I really thought about that. I read about other athletes it finally and for a while I thought, "Well, I just can't train hard anymore." Because Olympic athletes, it's all in, they do but then I read about some athletes like Gwen Jorgensen, who's a mom, she has 2 little boys, and she's a great mom, and she's also, on an Olympic well, she won the Olympics, in triathlon, and she's in the process of, coming back to hopefully do that again. So, so I thought if she can be a mom, why can't I be a grandma? And why can't I, have my grandkids and train too? And I came up with this idea of I call it periodized commitment, where part of the year and part of the week and part of the day I am on 100% committed to training and to doing what I need to do for triathlon. But then I give myself permission to say, but on grandparents' day at school, I'm not training. I'm going to grandparents' day. So, yeah, so I developed this kind of system where I'm all in 100% time sometimes, and I'm all in with family other times. So, yeah, that's worked well for me, and it fits with my values, and I'm back to being a happy camper.
Yeah, sounds like a great deal of balance, which I think is so important in our lives. Let me ask you this. Has your definition of success changed at all?
I don't think so because my definition of success has never been, tied to outcomes. It's always been tied to, did I do something to the best of my ability? Did I execute this race to the best of my ability? Now doing things to the best of my ability involves taking naps. And so I'm still, like, working hard, it's just that what I have to do to recover is different. I'm still executing well, I still feel that satisfaction. It's a little bit different. I just raced at, the National, Draft Legal Triathlon Championship last weekend, and I executed the race really, really well, so I'm really, really happy and feel that satisfaction. I came in among the people in the end, so but then I had to think that doesn't really matter, like, I executed well, I did everything I needed to do, and it's just I just don't have fitness, and my mind executed everything well, my body did the best that it could, so
Yeah.
no complaints, yeah, so
Well,
for me, that's success.
and again, I think that's such a great level of balance that you've been able to find and will continue to work on. I'm sure there will be highs and lows in your continued journey. But thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience. We've talked a lot about the book. How do people get a hold of the book if they're interested?
So the book's on available, both books. So Across the Line is the second book about trying to train like an Olympian and working with the Olympic level coaches, winning world championships, and then the fall into overtraining. So that's Across the Line. The other one, The Athlete Inside, is the beginning story of losing the 200 pounds. They're both available on Amazon and or anywhere where people purchase books if people do purchase a book, I hope it's a great read, but they've also made a donation to USA Triathlon Foundation, and we're earmarking those funds to help people with disabilities participate in sports. So I appreciate every sale because it really helps a great cause.
Oh, that is a great cause. And as I said earlier, what a generous donation on your part. Sue, congratulations on everything, the highest of highs and even the challenges that you made it through. You're such a great example of what active aging is and how you can overcome hardships and challenges and difficulties. But also find balance in life, which I think is great. If people want to get a hold of you and have questions, how do they reach out to you?
They can reach me. They can find my all my social media connections on my website, which is Sue Reynolds, Reynolds, SueReynolds.net. And I actively post on Instagram, and I love following other people too. So yeah, so I hope people will reach out.
Awesome. SueReynolds.net. Sue, once again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Just a couple of quick things to wrap us up here. I want everybody to remember and know that the clock is really ticking. In fact, it's almost out. Don't miss out, you guys, on being a part of the Huntsman World Senior Games. September 1st is the last day to register. That's just a few days away. But if you want to be a part of the Huntsman World Senior Games, you want to go to seniorgames.net. There you'll find all of the information you need, the dates, the venues, how to register. It's all there. Once again, that is seniorgames.net. Next week, we're going to be joined by Jean Duffy, whose love of soccer connected her with the inspiring soccer Grannies of South Africa. This is a group of 40 to 80-year-old women who love to play soccer so much so that they do so in skirts. They have grown to over 200 teams and have hosted what they call Grannies World Cups. They've had two of them. It's a gathering of women over the age of 50 from across Africa, the United States, and Europe. It's going to be a great show. Don't miss that one. If you've enjoyed this show, and we hope that you have, be sure to get all the education and the inspiration on the active life by subscribing wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can also find this and all of our previous shows on our website. Once again, that is seniorgames.net. We'd love it if you take a moment and give us a rating or write a review, ask questions, start a conversation online. Recommend the show to a friend. All of these things really help us grow and spread the word. Today's inspirational thought comes from American author and journalist Germany Kent, who once said, "Results happen over time, not overnight. Work hard, stay consistent, and be patient," which sounds like great advice in sports and in life. Until next time, stay active.